Hello and welcome. Today we will study the poem Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes. This poem is part of his famous Crow collection, which was published in 1970. The Crow poems are very different from traditional poetry. They are dark, myth-like, and often difficult. But they are also very rich in meaning. Before we begin the poem, let us first talk about Ted Hughes. He was born in England in 1930. He became one of the most famous poets of the 20th century. His poetry is often about nature, animals, violence, and myth. Hughes had a very strong interest in how human beings are connected to nature. He often showed animals in powerful and sometimes frightening ways. In the late 1960s, Hughes began to write poems about a figure called Crow. Crow is not just a bird in these poems. Crow is a mythic character. He is both an animal and a human, as well as comic and tragic. Sometimes he seems foolish, sometimes powerful, and sometimes like a survivor. In many ways, Crow represents the darker side of human nature, including pride, violence, and the struggle with meaning. The collection Crow is unusual because it is not simply about birds. It is about creation, death, survival, and the relationship between creature and creator. It asks very big questions. Why do we suffer? Why do we die? Why do humans destroy? What is the role of nature? These questions are expressed through the stories of Crow. The poem Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes is about Crow trying to fight the sun. This sounds like a simple story, but it is filled with meaning. It tells us about pride, rebellion, defeat, and transformation. In the first 3 lines of the poem, Ted Hughes creates a strange image. Normally, crows are black, but the poet says that he was white. White here symbolizes innocence, purity, or an earlier stage of being. Crow was not yet black. Crow had not yet been burned. Crow had not yet been marked by destruction. But Crow is dissatisfied. He looks at the sun and says it is too white. The sun's brightness bothers him. It is too whitely. This is an exaggeration, but it shows how Crow cannot accept the natural order. Instead of respecting the sun, Crow decides to attack it. This moment is filled with meaning. In mythology, many figures rebel against higher powers. For example, Icarus flew too close to the sun. Prometheus stole fire from the gods. Lucifer rebelled against God. In all of these stories, pride leads to downfall. Crow here is part of that same tradition. He is a mythic rebel. The word decided is repeated 3 times. This shows determination, but also stubbornness. Crow thinks he has power. But his decision is foolish, because he is a small creature trying to fight something enormous. In the next 3 lines, we see Crow preparing. He gathers his energy. He feels in full glitter. Glitter here means shine, but also false shine. Crow looks powerful, but it is only on the surface. He is preparing himself with rage and anger. He fluffs himself, like a bird making its feathers bigger. This is a symbol of pride. The line about aiming his beak at the sun's center is almost comic. A beak is small. The sun is unimaginably huge. This shows the absurdity of Crow's ambition. This is called irony, which means a contrast between what is expected and what actually is. Crow thinks he can fight, but the image shows us he cannot. In these lines of Crow's Fall, Ted Hughes makes a point about human beings too. Just like Crow, we also often imagine we can control or conquer forces larger than us like nature, fate, even death. But our weapons are small compared to those forces. The next line is very mysterious. Crow laughs before attacking. But this is not just ordinary laughter. The phrase, to the center of himself, suggests he is reaching his deepest core. The laughter might be madness. It might be pride or an act of false courage. We can link this to psychology. Sometimes, laughter hides fear, but sometimes, it shows arrogance. Crow's laugh here seems like arrogance. He is filled with himself. He is blinded by pride. This is also the moment before tragedy. In many myths and epics, the hero shows pride before falling. This is called hubris. Hubris means excessive pride that leads to downfall. Crow here is an example of hubris. This short line is very powerful. Just 2 words. It shows action. It shows finality. Crow does not just prepare but actually attacks. Academically, we can say that Hughes uses minimalism here. Minimalism means using very few words to create a strong effect. The sudden short line feels sharp, like the beak itself. In the next lines, Ted Hughes shows the impact of Crow's attack. His cry is not just loud. It shakes the natural world. Trees grow old instantly and shadows flatten. These are impossible things, but they show how myth works. In myth, one act can change nature. The image of trees growing old and shadows flattening should be read symbolically. It suggests that Crow's attack is so powerful that it seems to disturb time and light, but this is not literal but poetic. Crow's act is destructive, not just for himself, but for the world. This shows that rebellion against higher powers can have larger consequences. Now comes the turning point. The word, but, shows contrast. Crow thought he was strong, but the sun is stronger. Instead of being defeated, the sun becomes even brighter. The power of nature, or of creation, cannot be destroyed. Crow, however, is changed forever. He returns charred black. Charred means burned. Crow is no longer white. He is black, like the crows we know. This line can be read as a mythical explanation for why crows are black, but it is not a real folk story. Ted Hughes is using imagination, not giving a literal origin. But it also shows the cost of pride. Crow has been scarred forever. This moment is called transformation. Crow has been transformed by his failure. Transformation is a key theme in myth. Often, characters are changed by their actions, sometimes punished, sometimes rewarded. Here, Crow is punished by being burned. These lines of Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes show that Crow tries to speak, but even his voice is burned. His words are destroyed. What comes out is not clear speech, but something blackened and damaged. This shows that his rebellion has not only burned his body, but also his voice. Symbolically, this could mean that human beings, after rebellion or trauma, lose their clear expression. Their language becomes damaged. Hughes may be suggesting that violence and pride damage not only the body, but also communication. In the end, Crow speaks, but his words are ironic. He claims victory. He says, "I won." But we know he lost. He was burned. He was transformed. The sun only grew stronger. The phrase, "where white is black and black is white," is a paradox. A paradox is a statement that seems impossible but reveals truth. Crow is saying he has entered a strange world, where everything is reversed. But in reality, he is only trying to comfort himself. This shows human delusion. Even in defeat, we sometimes tell ourselves we have won. We change the meaning of things to protect our pride. Crow does this at the end. Analysis of Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes. First, this poem is about pride and rebellion. Crow represents the human desire to fight forces larger than ourselves. The sun represents creation, nature, or even creator. The result is always defeat, because those forces are greater. Second, the poem is about transformation through suffering. Crow begins white but ends black. His voice is destroyed but he survives. This shows that suffering changes us, sometimes permanently. Third, the poem is about irony and delusion. Crow loses but says he has won. This shows the way human beings often deceive themselves. Finally, the poem connects to the mythic tradition. Hughes uses Crow to retell these ancient themes in a modern way. In a nutshell, the poem Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes tells us about the dangers of pride. It teaches us that rebellion against larger powers often leads to defeat. It teaches us that suffering transforms us. And it teaches us that even in defeat, humans often pretend they have won. Ted Hughes's Crow poems are dark, but they are powerful. They show us human nature in a raw and honest way. These poems use myth, animal imagery, and irony to explain truths about life. Thank you for watching this video on explanation and analysis of Crow's Fall by Ted Hughes.